I think we're ready to talk about ascensions and Contra-Antiscia. So let me get that diagram up.
Yeah, so since we're talking about Gemini, Cancer, and then Sag and Cap, something very, very interesting, and the way that we were just talking about how those two relate to one another is also apparent in the Contra-Antiscia scheme. So with Antiscia, we took the solstitial axis. With Contra-Antiscia, however, we're taking the equinoctial axis that goes between Aries and Pisces and Virgo and Libra. And so the equinox, that's that pivot where we see the change in the amount of light, the change in the seasons that are happening. And so that's what's happening with the equinox. And this is different though, because remember how we were saying that Antiscia, there's the signs of long and short ascension?
Yeah.
This is that. This is factoring in more the rate of ascension than the amount of light available.
Yeah, so it's funny because like as we're looking at these diagrams, the reflecting pairs come from the groups that are united based off of the other kind of Antiscia. So this is where it's confusing because on this Contra-Antiscia diagram, we're talking about the northern and southern signs as two groups, with the northern signs being spring and summer when there's more light, and the southern signs being winter and autumn when there's less light. And the thing is, though, we get pairs like symmetrically from that, and these generate the Contra-Antiscia pairs. But like on the last diagram, it was about ascensions and we were talking about Antiscia, but the pairs are equal light. And now we're talking about Contra-Antiscia, but it's about the light, but we're talking about their equal ascension. So this is where it's going to be a little confusing. So we're just going to kind of explain a little bit more about what these ascensions are, so you guys kind of get a good visual for what it means for equal ascension.
Right. So like Antiscia is built upon ascension, but it is taking in the light. Contra-Antiscia is built upon the light, but is taking in the ascension.
Right.
If that helps clarify.
Yeah, because there is still a principle with light that we're getting here. And it's really interesting because with the signs that are Contra-Antiscia, instead of them having the equal amount of daylight and equal amount of hours of night, they're reversed. So for instance, the first pair here on the left, Aries and Pisces, the amount of hours for any given day in Aries season is equivalent to the amount of hours of nighttime in Pisces season. And the same for the inverse. So the amount of hours of daylight during Pisces season is equivalent to the hours of nighttime during Aries season. And so they swap light. And so that's why it's the Contra-Antiscia. It's like the counter shadow. It's the reversal and the opposition and the, reciprocal relationship that the light and darkness has with these two signs.
Right. So like Antiscia is like a parallel that you can see in the zodiac, whereas this is an anti-parallel. Like they're not intersecting, they're not bumping into each other, but they run opposite directions.
Right.
They're in the same place, but they're going different ways.
Yeah. And so like you can also think about like declination, for instance, if you're familiar with that, like parallels and contra-parallels. It's not the same concept, but it's the same principle that we have like two things that kind of mesh together, and then two things that kind of represent a contrariety that are like working together so that they can mesh, as opposed to the other two, which is like the Antiscia pairs are kind of more, they naturally kind of mesh. Whereas these ones have an oppositional quality that like make them like, okay, yeah, I can use your thing because I don't have that.
Right. Antiscia is like doubling down. And like this is like
balancing out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I'll throw up the Antiscia diagram one more time, because as we talk about the signs of the ascensional times with the signs, what we're looking at is seeing how these are all short ascension if you think about if the sun rises at 0 degrees of Capricorn, so in the winter solstice every year, the sun rises at 0 Capricorn, and then what rises after that? So the rest of Capricorn, and then Aquarius, and then Pisces and Aries, Taurus and Gemini, and all of the signs of short ascension, which means they rise quickly. So if the sun rises and then all 6 of the signs that rise fast come up on that day, that's going to be the shortest amount of daylight because all the fast signs are coming up on the winter solstice. Whereas when the sun rises on the summer solstice at 0 Cancer, all of the slow signs rise. So that day is going to be the amount of most daylight because all of the really long ascending signs are coming up after the sun. Yeah. So it's just another way to kind of place yourself in the zodiac to see, okay, these ones come up quickly. And that means the day is going to be short. Whereas, it's the inverse the other way around.
Right. And like if you have an app on your phone, any kind of astrology app where you can see like the chart for the moment, if you can catch an Aries rising chart, you're going to be like, whoa, like one and done, like so quick, like Aries and Pisces, especially in the northern hemisphere. That is something else. The farther north you go, some signs will rise quicker, and the closer to the equator you go and the farther south you go, like some signs will rise slower. So like these ascensional times do vary based on your relative position on the globe. Like this is entirely flipped when you're close to the South Pole, where like the signs of fast ascension are the signs on are signs of long ascension. So as always, take it with a grain of salt. We are limited in our perspective.
Yeah. So I think talking about like ascensional times and the timing techniques that come along with that is pretty involved, and hopefully we'll get into that at some point. But for the moment, all you have to know is that, for the northern hemisphere, these short ascension signs rise quicker, the long ascensions are slower, and the specific amount of time it takes completely depends on your latitude. And that's also just a really cool feature of the invention of this universe, because your timing techniques will play out completely different, even if you're born at the same second as someone else, if you're at different latitudes. So the ascensions are really interesting to look into. We'll definitely talk more about them in the future, but for now, these are the short ascension and these are the long ascension. And what we get when we look at the pairs is that when we reflect off of this axis, what we see is signs that take the same amount of time to rise. So that's why with Antiscia, we look at equal light. With Contra-Antiscia, we're looking at equal time or equal ascension.
Right. So even though the amount of night is equal to the amount of day with the two different pairs. So like the amount of night in Pisces season is equal to the amount of day in Aries season. That's not the main focus. Like we're looking more about like the fact that they ascend at the same rate. And even though we have this like opposite with the amount of daylight and the amount of night, that's not what we're really looking at here. We're looking at the significance between the fact that Aries and Pisces will rise at the same time, no matter where you are in the world, even if it takes longer. Like if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, those rates are still going to match. There's that parallel energy to them, but with the difference in day and night, there's that anti-parallel where one is running the opposite way.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool because, what we see here is actually this graded scale where as we move from left to right, so from Aries and Pisces to Taurus and Aquarius, Gemini Cap, they're getting longer and longer and longer in their ascensional times. And there is one little hiccup and caveat to this, and it's actually that Leo and Scorpio in several latitudes actually rise longer than Libra and Virgo. And it's kind of confusing because you think it's linear and it's not, because nothing ever is with astrology. But it's interesting to think about because while Aries and Libra do still take about, on average, 2 hours or more, Leo and Scorpio will rise a little bit longer. So Aries and Pisces are like a little over an hour. Or look at my latitude, like for America in a very broad scale, and that's still generalizing. I know a lot of you guys might not be in America. It's roughly like the long ones are over here like 2 hours, and these ones are closer to like hour 15, an hour. And that's also really cool because what we get from that is that in the Northern Hemisphere, because these ones spend way more time rising, you get way more people that have Leo, Virgo, Libra, or Scorpio as their ascendant versus Aries and Pisces. People with those ascendants are much rarer. And so it makes those house templates, much less common up here than it will be for someone in the Southern Hemisphere who has all this reversed.
Right. And something super fascinating about that is like the different planetary transits, like through the different signs. Like, I know several people with Jupiter in the first because they are Leo risings, and Leo takes a longer time to rise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very fascinating to witness, especially. And like, additionally, when it comes to outer planet transits, and I think that looking at like clusters of so many people who have Neptune in Sag in the first house, like that's fascinating. Like there were so many people with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that I was just going to bring about with this is just like we had with the Antiscia pairs, we had the seeing and perceiving. With the Contra-Antiscia, we actually have a commanding and obeying relationship between the two signs. And the northern signs with more light have that power to command the southern sign, which will obey it. And so
And
this,
I think
what were you going
I
to
think
say?
that those words, I think that
Yeah, I
the
was just about to say
specific
that
like
note.
energy of those words, like commanding and obeying, like
Mm-hmm.
makes people upset, especially like that, like Cancer, like Sag, like in particular. I feel like Sagittarians are not happy when you're like, oh yeah, like Sag is commanded by Cancer, like Sag obeys Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
But like they're just words. Like in
Yeah.
this instance, like the language has evolved so that that's not quite as descriptive of the energies at hand here and like the way that they interact. So like
Mm-hmm.
keep that in mind if you wince at the idea of being commanded by a Taurus as an Aquarius.
Yeah, like I made a thread about this a while ago and it got a lot of attention because I think just some people didn't realize that these words were coming based off of like this model that Antiscia sets up for us. So these words it's used as a model to describe the fact that Gemini sees Capricorn by Contra-Antiscia, but also that it has the commanding relationship because it has more light. So it doesn't literally mean, oh, if you're a Gemini, you're naturally just going to command a Capricorn. It means that Gemini has this upper hand in the connection because it just represents the fact that Gemini has the light that's equal to Capricorn's night. So that's really what it means. It's just a model for the relationship.
Right, exactly. And like in the way that society is, it's like whoever, like diurnal charts, diurnal energy has the upper hand in society. And it has been that way. Yeah, yeah. For a very
Aries commanding Pisces right here. Maybe it is true, guys.
yeah, except I did not get my way with these damn graphs.
Well, yeah, I will say
They look gorgeous.
okay. All right. So the first one, well, where should we start?
All right, we can start wherever you want this time.
We're gonna start with Aries and Pisces. All right. So we're looking at this like generally archetypal beginning and ending and the reset of the cycle. Yeah, it's debatable. We pick the beginning wherever it is, but it has so much symbolic attribution that Aries is the first seed and Pisces is the final reabsorption into the soil, the compost. And so when we're talking about Aries Pisces connection, it's the links in the chain of the cycle that allow it to reset. So I called this one the wheel of time because to have a beginning, you need an ending, and to have an ending, you need a beginning. And what's interesting is, Aries is commanding Pisces. So there's always a new beginning after every ending. There's always going to be initiating a new cycle. And so that kind of speaks to the, generative principle of the universe to create life in some way, I think.
Right, I agree. And I think that the whole idea of like cycles, I do agree, is like very captured in this specific pair, especially the fact that like Aries commands Pisces too. And also like if you, let's say that somebody has some kind of aspiration, right? Like Aries is very much like an aspirative sign, but like in order to have that aspiration, there needs to be a goal, there needs to be a like object in mind.
Right.
And Pisces might not be the most directional sign, but Aries definitely can be. And so like Pisces thinks up like what they want, like, oh, like the Pisces energy is like, oh, like this is a dream of mine, and then the Aries energy is like, let's put this dream into action, bitch, like let's get her going. And so like you have to, in order to, I kind of, this is very similar to what I was saying about like Cap and Sag earlier, but in order to have a dream, you have to have a reality, and you have to have the will to accomplish and materialize that dream. And now fire and water are not the most material signs. They're not the best at materializing things, but there's definitely a lot of that energy here. When you have heat and you have water, you get things like hurricanes. And you know how much force and how much power there is in that. And then right in the middle, you have the eye of the storm that's just incredibly blissful and full of birds that know to stay in the eye. And I think that hurricanes very much speak to this dynamic between Aries and Pisces. And like with what you were saying about time, like the Bermuda Triangle, like let's talk about weird shit with time and beginnings and endings there.
Yeah. With these two signs, we have a lot of really interesting dynamics to explore with the dignities. So at first, like we can think about this being the home of Mars and Jupiter. And that's a really interesting combination of planets because, they're both superior planets, right? They both have longer orbits than the sun. But we're also looking at two really hot planets. They're very warm, which is good for generating life. But the issue is that Mars is dry and Jupiter is wet, right? Aries is fire, which is hot and dry, and Jupiter is wet, which is a water sign. So there's this friction between it like trying to generate life, like that's the heat principle, but then there's the combat between the dryness and the wetness of Mars and Jupiter. And so it's almost like Aries can't
it's like the goal, the dream is a rainbow, but the effect is a hurricane. Like there's this difficulty with materializing something in a sustainable way, in a long withstood way.
right.
Both Mars and Jupiter can be very sporadic, and Mars much more so with Jupiter. But there's this degree of impermanence that comes with this sign, with this pair, but it's very comfortable impermanence for these two signs. Like they're very okay with the idea of something short-lived, as long as it reaches its climax in the time that it's around,
Well, the thing is, like, sometimes I feel like there's not a climax because, like, when you think about Mars, which is nature is just to energize and heat things up, and Jupiter is just expanding things, there's kind of like this limitless, endless, cyclical, self-feeding cycle where, in a way, it almost encapsulates the idea of the whole zodiac from the first and the last sign. it's like this thing just wants to create. It's like a petri dish. It's like there's all this energy festering into it, coming in and out of incarnation, like pulling off of an archetype versus pulling off of something, more real and more, tangible and visible. And the other thing I feel like is, it's the exaltation of the sun in Aries and the exaltation of Venus in Pisces. And so, whereas like with other signs, when we looked at, for instance, Libra and Pisces, which exalt Venus and Saturn, like the stability of the Venusian energies through like restriction. In this case, we're looking at the endurance of the Venusian energies through the expression of life. And so it almost relates to the Leo Taurus Antiscia pair, I feel like, wherein there's this productive nature of these two signs where they want to like continually be reproducing and regenerating. That it's like, if this principle wasn't built into these two signs, like life wouldn't exist. Like this is a necessary part of the zodiac because there has to be this beginning and ending principle, and they have to be united like this.
Right. This section really makes me think about the Ouroboros.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the
Yeah.
snake swallowing itself
Mm-hmm.
and being okay with that too.
Mm-hmm.
And being okay with the highs and the lows. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this sign, this pair, though it does not like to recharge, I feel like that would be the reason why it doesn't quite reach its apex, is
Mm-hmm.
because like it might not take the time to reestablish itself after jumping,
Yeah.
but it still will chase it. It still wants it, and it does not mind falling on its face and trying again,
Right.
brushing
And
off its knees.
yeah, and I feel like that's the other thing, is like these are the two fastest ascending signs. And so there's like this speed too, that it's like these things come up off of the ascendant like nothing. It's like it's the ram and the fishes, which I feel like, fish just move so quickly and so smoothly through their environment in the water, and the ram is, like go right towards it. And so their animals even speak to like that quick nature.
Right, but then let's think about rams that scale the like cliff faces with like this
Mm,
50-pound bulk of bone protruding from its head.
yeah.
Not an animal that you would describe as elegant by any means, but damn, is that bitch agile.
Yeah.
Get around. This is a very, very agile, very quick combination with the
Mm,
ascension times too. Yeah. But
yeah.
then something that I wanted to poke your brain about a little bit more, when you were talking about Pisces Libra versus Pisces Aries, were you saying that Pisces Aries is more committal? That Pisces Aries will last longer?
Well, Pisces Libra is trying to exalt Venus and Saturn, whereas the Pisces Aries is exalting, Venus and the Sun. And so we're looking at this principle between life as a self-generating principle versus life as a slowly decaying principle. And it's like Venus and Saturn, like that decaying but fusing energy, like they merge in a way where it's like, two people will live together so they can live out their lives and die. Whereas like Venus Sun, we're looking at two people wanting to be married so that their souls will reunite in the afterlife. It's
Right.
like there's more of a um, Aries is the fall of Saturn. So we're looking at everything that's against that decrepit, decaying, slow nature of Saturn. It's everything against, the Pisces being the fall of Mercury. It's everything against the quick moving, retrograding, what's the word, dynamic and
Versatile.
versatile, that's the word I was looking for, principle of Mercury, where instead, I mean, that's just a whole thing with the Virgo Pisces axis to think about exalting Venus versus exalting Mercury. But like, and we'll get into this too when we talk about the quad, because they all make a whole relationship as a four. So maybe we should just pause and come back to this,
Yeah,
because we're gonna
we're
get
getting
into
real
that when
far
we,
out there.
yeah. So we'll come
So
back to that. Yeah.
so this next Antiscia pair, Contra-Antiscia pair, we're gonna just call it Contra-Antiscia. Like one
Yeah.
Contra-Antiscia.
We almost debated just eliminating an A and the hyphen and just calling it Contra-Antiscia, like one thing, because it just sounds kind of like Contra-Antiscia.
I know.
I don't know.
I know.
Contra-Antiscia.
There's no point for the glottal stop between the two A's. Just make it Contra-Antiscia. You don't have to do Contra-Antiscia. Like,
hiccup in between.
Yeah. Anyways, now that we've been all dramatic, the next pair that we'll be talking about is Taurus and Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very fascinating pair because we have the blossoming sustenance and sustaining of life that is happening in the early spring compared with the maintenance of winter and the perseverance of the cold that is happening in during Aquarius season.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was the one where earlier when I said starving artist, this is actually the starving artist.
Yeah. I think because, all right, well, once again, there's 100 things to say about the dignities, but with this one, we're looking at now the home of Venus and the home of Saturn. So we haven't seen that yet. Because before we saw like Libra, Pisces trying to strive for that. Now that's like the baseline of how these are connected. So there's the balance between union and death as a principle. And so they're very contrary in their nature, because the other thing we can think of is, you know, for a night chart, these are the extremes, right? The most benefic and the most malefic. And we also saw that with Mars and Jupiter in the last one. So for diurnal charts, they're going to be the most benefic Jupiter and the most malefic is Mars. And I think with both of these pairs, but at least in this case for Venus and Saturn, there's this very like relaxed principle that's being met with like this really heavy, angry, like stubborn, and almost like frustrating principle of like this inevitable death of things in life. But like it's Taurus commanding Aquarius. So it's like, it's Venus saying like, all right, like death is a reality, but like life prevails. Like spring comes after winter. Like life will be reborn. Those blossoms will come again.
Right. And like, I think that Aquarius is very indifferent. Like it's not quite so like, yeah, but like
It can be sometimes.
Okay, it can be. Cranky Aquarians are people I do not like to be around. But
No one
neither are
does.
cranky Taurians.
That's true too. That's fair.
Yeah. The thing, something that I kind of picture with this is like the housewife and the husband who's been at work all day, and like the housewife, like the husband comes home to like this beautiful meal and like a clean home, and like he just like can't stop being angry about like what happened at work, like is still frustrated, is just like scarfing down food, like I'm so hungry, I just need to eat, like I can't enjoy this, doesn't say thank you, like just kind of like gets up from the table and like goes to bed. And like Venus and Taurus isn't going to stop making dinner. Like Venus is just going to be like, damn, like a little appreciation would be nice, you know? And I think that that might come with these Antiscia pairs, is like an area of life where you don't feel like your effort has been appreciated. And like there can be some tension in these houses in whatever area of life you have, where it's this internal feeling of underperforming or like rejection almost, like whether it be by other people or by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just one of the other things with these two signs is like, it takes time to build a castle. You know, it's like, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be adorned and embellished, but like it needs a sturdy foundation. Like Saturn and Aquarius, that's a heavy energy, and we are all feeling that right now under the Saturn station, you know, like in every way. To have a beautiful flourishing painting, how many painstaking hours of, you know, work do you have to put into that?
Right. And look at how long it takes a tree to grow. And like with flowers blooming in the spring, like they grow all year for these flowers that die like so
Mhm.
quickly. And like cacti, I feel like are a really, really good example because
Yeah.
it's so dry in the desert. It's
Mhm.
such an extreme. It gets so cold and it gets so hot that very little life can flourish. But whatever life does is extremely resilient.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also speaks to like Taurus being the moon's exaltation and Aquarius being the sun's detriment. It's like there's this conflicting energy that's coming through like the luminary aspect here, where Taurus is like having this like fruitful, physical, affectionate side to it. And Aquarius has this, closed off, cold, feeling like dejected or feeling outcast sense of itself, where it's like this, it's this shooting way. It's Taurus commanding Aquarius. It's like, I'm here, like I'm sprouting. I have this, like all this to offer. And Aquarius is like, doesn't want to accept it in a way because it's like something internal, right? It's like detriment sun. Like this soul is not producing itself as it wants to express naturally.
Right. And like the moon like loves Taurus and like hates
Right.
Aquarius.
That's the other thing. The moon just really doesn't like Aquarius. Like being
No.
in Saturn sign, which is it's detriment in Capricorn, and it's in air where it doesn't have triplicity, and the moon still has trip in Capricorn. So yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have an episode about peregrine planets too.
Yeah. We'll have an episode on everything.
Yeah, just
Eventually, one
patience,
day. Yeah.
patience,
Yeah.
patience.
Patience,
All
Taurus,
right.
Aquarius, Saturn
Yeah,
in
beautiful
Aquarius.
art requires patience,
Yes.
y'all.
Yeah. Especially this episode. Like, I know it'll have been like some time since we posted, but like we put a lot of work into this episode. And so I think there's something very Venus and Taurus, Saturn and Aquarius about this episode. Hopefully you're enjoying it and feeling very exalted moon, very nice. And okay, I'm going too far with this. Anyway, yeah, is there anything else about Taurus
Sorry.
Aquarius?
The,
Oh,
the Pisces Libra Antiscia just like
okay, enough of you calling me out for my Antiscia. Just let's keep going here.
okay. All right. Cap Gemini.
Oh, this is a rough one. This
This
is,
is
it's just tricky to articulate.
It is, and it's arguably one of my favorite combinations throughout the entire like concept of Antiscia and
Mhm.
Contra-Antiscia.
The first thing I'm going to say really quickly, and this doesn't have a super grounded approach other than like empiricism, but I think this is a very mystical combination. I think this is a combination that's like very much inclined to be curious about like the occult
I agree. I agree 100% with that
or
for sure.
history, even like just it's a deep curiosity into like dark, unknown, hidden, old things, antique things.
Mhm.
It's something related to that. It's there.
This fascination with like what you should not have access to,
Mm,
like being told like no, like don't go in that room, and like you just it makes you want to know what is in that room so much more.
right.
And Gemini will figure out how to know what is in that room
Yeah.
even if they never step foot in it.
Hmm.
Like there's some, it's so sly too. Like this energy really embodies this elusive nature to it, where it's like you might know about, you might know of, you might have even seen the person, but like you have to know and be comfortable with the idea that you can only see the surface. Like
Hmm.
there's something about this combination that knows that it can only see the surface, and it wants so badly to penetrate beneath that and get to the very, very core.
Okay, yeah. So look, Gemini and Capricorn are like really like these are two really deeply connected signs, and it's so totally not on the surface level because so they're contra Antiscia, right? they also have the same 3 Chaldean decans, which is really interesting because there's no other Antiscia or Contra-Antiscia pairs that have that, because the other ones are like Sagittarius and Leo Pisces and some other ones. But these two share the same decans. They go Jupiter, Mars, Sun. And I think it's really interesting that they both share that solar decan as the final expression of the sign, especially for Gemini, right? Because it's reaching towards the solstice right at the very end. But then for Capricorn, like it's about to enter Aquarius, which is where the sun has its detriment. So I think there's an interesting like process of them both going from like Jupiter, but then having their fixed decan or their middle expression as Martian. Because what the other connections we get here, a lot of them come through tarot. So for anyone who's familiar with these cards, we're looking at card number 6, which will be the Lovers for Gemini, and then card 15, which is the Devil for Capricorn. The first thing, numerology, 15, that's 1 and 5, which adds to 6, which is the Lovers. And on top of that, we both see pairs of twins on both. So with the Devil card, we have Adam and Eve. And then with the Lovers card, we obviously have the 2 lovers. And they both have the Devil and the Angel above them. And on top of that, this solar decan, which is each of their final expression, they add to 6. And in Kabbalistic philosophy, which is the whole mechanism behind the tarot, 6 is the number of the sun. And then on top of that, in the Sun card, you have the solar twins. You have the Apollo and or sorry, that's not right. Not Apollo.
You have the solar twins.
Right. You have the solar twins, and those appear in those 3 cards. And it's like it's speaking to this like Sun, Mercury, Saturn, like trigonal connection here between these 3 planets. It's very interesting. It's really interwoven, and there's a lot of nuance in all of that. But yeah.
Right. Well, Mercury is just, it's so apparent here because Mercury makes his trips to the underworld. Mercury has the first bound of both Gemini and Capricorn.
That's right.
Yeah. And so this and like Saturn can see through bullshit. Like I feel like Saturn is one of the few people that Mercury actually like cannot lie to. Like Mercury might like try to lie, but like Saturn will see right through it. Whereas like other planets, like Mercury might be able to like pull a quick one on them and they'll find out once he's like out of reach. Whereas like, and like Mercury too, like Mercury sees what's going on. This is a very piercing combination. This combination puts the polarized glasses on when you're fishing in a lake so that you can see the lake bed past the reflection rays of the sun. And there's something so fascinating about like the sun's like final decan there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that like when we're talking about uniting these things, we have the Sun and Saturn and like Mercury uniting these in this way with Gemini, because Mercury is the union of opposites, right? And so we have like the Sun as like the divine principle and Saturn as the adversarial, or literally the devil, right, in tarot. And so Mercury or Gemini being the union of these two, I think speaks to the effort that these 2 signs have in pair to integrate the shadow in that way, that there's like a really like deep dive into, like in some cases, reading about the occult, or it could be a fascination with some like really specific hobby, or like it could be a unique interest in some like specific pursuit that somehow like brings you out of yourself, and it's like a beneficial like thing for you. Like Mercury Saturn, it's like committing yourself to the knowledge about some like subject, or committing your ideas to a tradition or like a lineage in a way. And lineage is another theme that will come up with another pair, actually the next pair.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, this is going into quadrupotence, but this is almost like the establishment of the tradition. Like this is figuring out like why this is so powerful and like why it should become a tradition for the family to do. And like, there's something very niche about this. Like, whatever it ends up being has some kind of like uncommon thing to it. Like, it's not the kid who knew all of the littlest pet shops, or like the Polly Pockets, you know, stuff like that, like, or the Pokemon, you know, like, this is like some kid who like can tell you like all of the plants, like the most common weeds on the sidewalk, like something just very like, what about it, you
Yeah.
know?
I think the other thing, and I wasn't going to bring this up, and we'll go into it really deeply with quadrupotence, but like this is the exaltation of the North Node and Mars. And so Rahu Mars is a really violent energy. And it's also interesting that, you know, it's the Mars connection from Capricorn to Gemini, and that's the middle decan of Gemini, right? And so there's this really like violent immersion into something, right? It's like North Node, Rahu is, you know, drive yourself into the material world, and Mars is like, go right for it.
See, but the thing about this Mars Rahu is so voracious here, especially, that the material is not enough. Like, having things is not enough. Like, I need to know things. I need to be able to understand the things that are not material, the metaphysical, you know? And I think that it reaches this like such a intense degree here with the Mars Rahu connection, that like what I can see, feel, touch, the tangible is not enough.
Yeah. And it's like, it's the realization that, you know, after that voracious effort of driving yourself into materiality, you realize it's like you're going to hit some hard wall, and you're like, it's probably going to be something that causes you to have a spiritual crisis, and that brings you to, you know, the awareness of the metaphysical in a really general sense.
Right, right. I agree. I agree. And that's usually like when you think about how near death experiences like catapult people into completely different trains of spiritual thought,
Mm-hmm.
every single person you hear of and know of who has had a near death experience, okay, I won't say every because there's people who just see black, but like they tend to come out on the other side, like even if they don't experience anything, they come back from that near death experience with a different outlook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, something interesting, I feel like that immersion of like the coming out into a different outlook within the world, like from some radical experience you have, like if you think about how coming after the winter solstice, you have Capricorn, it's kind of like hitting the IC and then a planet going into the third house. Whereas with Gemini, you have this advancement up towards the midheaven without going cadent afterwards, which is the 10th house. So it's almost like there's this third 10th house connection. And, you know, it's the joy of the moon. And we know all about it, the house of the goddess, ritual, magic, religion, also, you know, travel and communication. But with that idea of the profession and reputation and being seen, there's this link between that liminal space, like right after you hit the angle, and also like right before you're about to hit the top, where you merge this desire to like reach the depth of something and like come out of the hardest part of something, and then equally project that into your vision of like the highest, you know, whatever that is, whether you're talking in the sense of like a career or like in a metaphysical sense.
Right, right. And I think that this combination is similar to the Aries Virgo one, where we
Mm-hmm.
just had this like intense just effort, very laborious. But like to the energy in that moment, like it doesn't feel so like weighty. It's not exhausting
Mm-hmm.
in the moment to be on this like this, I don't want to say quest, but like have this mission for knowledge, because it's not a quest, it is a mission.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a determination. And Mercury can be especially because it's Gemini Mercury, right? The active Mercury with the feminine Saturn, right? So there's like this cardinal Earth Saturn that's obeying this like super active, crazy air Mercury. And it's like the Mercury can just keep going. It's almost like the Saturn provides a foundation for Mercury to have that relentless end of knowledge. And then you have the Mars Rahu principle, which is like, let's just keep going with it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Very true. Yeah. So,
I feel like a name for this one could be like occult madness. You know, like
the
the
mad
crazy scientist.
scientist.
Yeah.
The mad scientist. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Sometimes I like have these moments during the podcast where I'm like, wow, like if the average person who like didn't have any knowledge of the occult was listening to this, they would think that we were absolutely batshit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely very Gemini Capricorn kind of information that's coming out here.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love the Santisha pair.
Me too. All right. Are you ready for Sagittarius and Cancer? What the
Yeah.
hell?
This is like the
Another
weirdest.
mind-boggling pair. We have a lot of them with the Contra-Antiscia pairs. They're really interesting to explore.
I know.
So the
I feel
archetype.
like, okay, I feel like there are some Antisha pairs that make way more sense than others. Like
Absolutely.
as at like a first glance, and
Yeah.
like this, the two specifically that come to mind with ones that are like, what? Are like Aries Virgo and then Cancer Sag are ones where, okay, Aries Virgo even scratch that because that made sense. But like
I struggled with that one at first. It's hard to see.
it, yeah,
It's so
uh-huh,
hard to articulate. They all are. But
right. But then Cancer Sag is like by far, like for me, the one that had me be the most like, what? Like,
yeah,
what are you talking about?
right. And it's funny because like for me when I think about ones that make a lot of sense, like Libra Pisces connects, and it's that really strong Venusian domicile and exaltation, right? And we see that with this one too, because it's domicile and exaltation of Jupiter. Yet there's just something so different about them because we're looking at different elements. Because with before we were looking at air and water, which generally do pretty well together, right? And air or fire and earth can mesh pretty well. But now with the contra pairs, we're looking at like fire, water, and then like air, earth, which is like definitely more combative elemental relationships. But at least in this Jupiter case, when we're looking at Sag and Cancer, um, I feel like there's this total opposition going on because we have Cancer, which is Mr. Crab, and then Mr. Sagittarius, right? The centaur. Like these animals are so different, right?
Right. Well, so the one thing that is worth mentioning though
Mm.
is that crabs do have weapons. And if you have ever been chased by a crab on a beach, they will get you. Like they will not stop until they get you or until you can grab them and fling them.
Mm.
Don't ask me, I won't tell. But Cancer and Sag, something else with like this like old Mr. Crab versus like this exploratory centaur is that like hermit crabs, they have to change their shells as they grow. Like they have to relocate. And in order to do that, they have to be these naked little squishy crabs with like all of their innards exposed before they can get into the next shell where they can be comfortable and protected. And like that takes exploration. Like that requires that Sagittarian, all right, I'm just gonna run, I'm gonna do it, I
Yeah.
got
I feel
this.
like that's just why Jupiter exalts in Cancer. Do you know what I mean? It's like Cancer has to express itself in a way, like for that sign to exist, if it's just like water moon, like that's just like, all right, I'll just chill here. This is very comfortable. But for it to exalt Jupiter, like that sign's function is like, oh my gosh, like I need to create life. I need to like experience life and not just be in a shell. And like the Contra-Antiscia pair to Sag, I think definitely boosts that Jupiter relationship that lets it get out of its shell. But because it's Contra too, it's like Cancer can also be really, obviously averse to wanting to get out into the world and do the things, whatever. I don't know. I can't think of anything else. Opposed to the Sagittarian things.
Right. Well, like Sag, like on a Saturday night is gonna like recharge with like a party, and then like
Yeah.
Cancer is like, I need to be in my bed.
I'll take a
Like,
bath.
yeah, like let's reset, let's reboot, hit the
Yeah.
restart button, and that Sagittarian exploration is necessary. But then at
Mhm.
the same time, in order for Sagittarius to be exploring, in order for Sag to be able to explore, let's use that key word, it needs a place that it is exploring from. In order to go on an adventure, you have to have a place that is familiar to you, that you are abandoning, that
Mhm.
you're leaving. And so when you have the moon and Cancer versus Jupiter and Sagittarius, like that is that like caveman who takes the first step out of the cave. And like and knowing that like the cave and the comfort is back there. You can't be daring and explorative if there's nowhere you're exploring from. And I think that that is why Cancer commands Sagittarius, because you can't be an explorer if you have no home. At that point, you're just a wanderer
Yeah.
with no goal in mind.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the moon Jupiter connection here is just really interesting because, the moon and her cycles, her generation and corruption, in a way seems very aligned with like this mutable fire, which is like such an ephemeral, like non-existent quality in itself. And it's like the moon itself, is alive and then disappears. It's like there's this connection between these two where it's exalting like that spiritual release in a way, because when we look at Sag, that exalts the south node, Ketu, which is all about releasing the self and absorbing into the spiritual, the release from the material. And so having the not mutual exaltation, but having them both exalt Jupiter, Ketu, it's like, wow, there's this search for like birth and death, like to be here and then to not be here, to be alive and to be dead. And it's also like Ketu, as the principle of like lessening things as well. Jupiter and the south node could be about that lesson of like, restriction or less travel or less exploration too. So the south node, Jupiter, through the exaltations too, I think brings up that lesson again of like feeling constricted where you are and then having to, fight your way out of your shell.
Right, 100%, 100%. And like sometimes the fight is imagined too. Like sometimes the fight is not real. And that can happen a lot with Kitu too. Things that are not real, things that are just imagined. And the moon as well, like in her new moon phase, the dark side of the moon. The moon is never full. The moon is only ever full from our perspective on Earth. The full moon is only half of the moon. And so there's that, like, if you're looking at it from above, if that made sense, it
Yeah.
should. Yeah. And so, like, there is that degree of, like, it's not real. Like, your fears are not real until you have to face them. And I think that that's some of the encouragement that comes here. Whereas, like, Gemini and Cap is like, oh, like, I'm interested in these fears. Like, let's dance with them a little bit. Like, Cancer and Sag is like, you cannot let these fears keep you from doing anything. Like, it does not matter if you want to learn about them or not. You have something you need to do, and you need to be able to do it.
Yeah, and the other principle I feel like here, pulling off of like Jupiter's wisdom, and like Cancer's like knowledge of the past and like experience, I think there's a really future mindset that these two signs have as well, where it's like Cancer's so concerned with like it's, you know, giving birth to children and future generations, and Jupiter as well as like a general significator in astrology for children. Even the moon Jupiter makes the lot of like male children, for instance. I feel like there's also this idea of like creating a home and being able to not just like sustain it, but be able to like teach your children in a way. You know, it's like the Sag and the Cancer. It's like, how can you be a role model for other people and like people younger than you in a way? Does that make sense?
Right, it does make sense. This is the lineage. This is the
Right.
tradition.
Yeah.
This is the tradition that we were talking about earlier with Gemini Cap, is
Mm,
that there is some degree of like torch bearing, you know, like I'm passing it on to you. And
yeah.
like it is your turn to either let this live and help um, facilitate this,
Mm,
or to let it die
yeah.
and stay trapped in its shell.
Right. I think because this pair can definitely fizzle out too because of the fickle nature of Sag, but also of Cancer as well. Um,
Right.
like the fact that they're in conjunct in some senses, they're very different, but I think they're very alike in their movable nature. Because of all the inconjuncts with like a mutable sign and another, it's probably Sag and Cancer that are the most revolving doors of all of them. So there's like a speed and like this rapid movement that they both have, but it's like it's almost like a hamster wheel because you're like in one place. But it's this question of like, well, is this wheel rolling and getting me somewhere, or am I just moving for the sake of movement and I'm actually staying where I am and staying trapped in that ball?
Right. That's a great point. And something else is that, like, not every crab has claws. Like, a lot of crabs just have their protective shell.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Sag does not have protection, only a weapon.
Mm.
And so,
Which it
like,
crafted,
what was that?
like which it crafted, you know?
Right, right. And so there's this, like, you need to use both your sword and your shield. Like, it is the balance, because you can't burn yourself out. A bad warrior will go and swing and swing and swing and swing with no shield, no armor, just thinking that they're agile and accurate enough to beat their opponent. But a good warrior has their shield and knows how to use it, and knows that sometimes you can even use a shield as a weapon.
Yeah.
And so it's balancing all of these different, this is a very balancing act, you know? Like, I feel like balance is a very big keyword there, because they do balance each other out so well, and they are both so movable.
Mm. I feel like if Cancer Sag, it's kind of like the really sweet like fourth grade teacher you had, and then like Gemini Capricorn is like that really strict teacher you had in high school. It's like they're both trying to impart their knowledge in a way, and one of them is coming from like this much more caring standpoint, and then the other from like this much more like rigid, like you need to learn this, like you're here to learn. Whereas
Right.
Cancer Sag is like you're here to learn life lessons, and Cancer Gemini is like you need to learn how to do this integral and solve the
Yeah.
derivative, and it's like two very different approaches to like learning in general. You know, it's like the learning about the material world versus like learning about like the human experience here.
Right. Well, what came to mind when you introduced the teacher analogy, like before we even finished that, was
Mhm.
like an English teacher versus a history teacher.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
there were two very distinct teachers that like came to my mind,
Mhm.
but the English teacher wants you to be able to communicate, be able to express yourself, be able to fill this out, be able to do this well, because this is something you need for your life. Whereas the history teacher, history is incredibly interesting. It's very important. Is it useful? Not if you're not an astrologer, you know? Like, people don't seem to learn from history, even though all of these historians are like, this is happening again for the nth time, you know? And so, like, the history teacher is like, you need to learn about this because it has intrinsic value. You should know where you came from, you should know what happened before you, but that's not knowledge that can really be applied in your everyday life. Whereas knowing how to communicate, that is essential to life.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's another thing that comes with this combination. And that is also something that will be fleshed out much more thoroughly when we talk about quadrupotency.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like one more analogy with this, but we'll go into it more with the whole quad group. But like Cancer side is more like the therapist, and then Capricorn Gemini is more like, oh my God, I mean,
the financial counselor.
Sure, yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
for it.
Mm-hmm. Like the financial counselor does not care that you just went through the worst divorce of your life. They care that you're like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt.
Yeah.
You know, they don't care. I'm sorry, babe. An ex is an ex, even when it was marriage.
It's also funny because I didn't mention it, but Mercury Saturn's the lot of debt.
That is very fascinating.
Yeah.
That is very true.
Wow. Okay. Well, we were on those for a while. Let's get to Leo Scorpio. I think we hashed it out enough.
Right.
Leo Scorpio. What a pair.
Leo Scorpio.
Another kind of tricky one. Like it seems like it would be clear, but you think about it and you're like, well.
Yeah, it's a unique one. Leo Scorpio like calls to the martyr for me. Like Leo Scorpio is like, I will sacrifice myself so that I go down in history as the one who sacrificed themselves for the better cause to save humanity. Do you get like what I'm kind of saying? Like,
I do, but I feel like in some ways it could also be like the evil king, like cutting off his enemies' heads.
yeah.
So it's like,
That's okay. The evil king also, like, speaking of off with their heads, Taurus, Aqua.
yeah,
For
yeah.
sure.
I mean, they're both like both of these pairs are. Oh, here we go into comparing the pairs again.
I know.
It's helpful though. It's necessary. Like Leo, Scorpio. So with these signs, instead of like, okay, we looked at Leo Taurus, which is home of the sun, exalted moon. Now we're looking at home of the sun and fallen moon. So it's like the solar principle is doing great, but inside, it's not so happy. It's like you're almost trying to completely like put on a persona of someone else in a way. Like there's a complete disconnection with how you're feeling and who you are to yourself.
Right. And something really fascinating that makes me
Really
think
fascinating. Yeah, I bet.
The Leo Scorpio.
This is very Leo Scorpio right here.
Listen, we can tussle. Anyways.
My Venus Jupiter square is coming for you.
And my Mercury Jupiter square won't let you. Anyways. Leo Scorpio. Leo rules the heart, Scorpio rules the genitals. And like what you were saying earlier about like not being able to fully express yourself, like that really makes me think of like the teenage years. And like you have like, and especially with the like diurnal and like masculine energy, like having the upper hand here, you have like the stereotype of the teenage boys whose hearts follow their genitals. Do you get what I'm saying? And like there's something, it's that does describe the energy at play, but then on a bigger scale, you have this desire for something and like taking the smallest bit of satisfaction and then pouring your heart into it. You know, like there's this gratification followed by like commitment that can come with that. And part of that can also stem from feeling like you have not had that gratification, like you have not had access to the satisfaction. With Leo commanding Scorpio, Leo is going to chase that satisfaction. Leo is going to tell Scorpio, like, you need to whatever. And like whatever it is that's going to fill Scorpio up, whatever will put some ripples in that pond, will do it. Like Leo will seek that out.
Yeah. I think the Sun Mars principle here is pretty strong, obviously, because we're looking at home of the Sun and home of Mars. And, they're both, it's Mars in his preferred domicile. So we're looking at this very strong Leo Sun in this very adversarial square relationship to this very conniving Scorpio Mars. And it's like this position of being so seen with this position of being so hidden. And this seenness, right? This visual, what was I trying to say? This like very bright figure that's trying to bring this other guy up to light. And he's like, no, I want to be in my cave, And so it's like this combat between being so decidedly like reclusive and having like such a hidden part of yourself too. Like, I think it just speaks in general to, we all have this solar personality that we project, but we also have a completely different inner side that we hide from everyone. And so I think this Contra-Antiscia kind of speaks to just the human dilemma of like, what do I integrate into my relationships with other people? How do I accept this part of this myself, like within me, right? Like this fallen moon, like how do I bring up my inner world and exalt it and then create and share, right? Leo Taurus, and give it to other people. It's like there's these two very different halves going on, especially because they're in different sects as well.
Right. And like part of how that can manifest is like Leo bringing light to Scorpio as like Scorpio being like, look at my misery. Like I need that like validation. Like I, like that kind of energy.
Let me obey you so that I can have this like vulnerable victim complex that I can pull from as an excuse to not have to share honest, and so I can lie and make an excuse.
Right. And like that's why I was saying with like the martyr, like who's just like, oh, like it'll be me. Of course it'll be me, and like and like we all have this part of our chart. So before we get some angry comments from anybody, don't want to feel like we're like flaming you, but like I don't know how many times you need to say to a Scorpio, like, let your guard down for them to like actually ever do it. Like, if you look at a Scorpio, if you look at the Scorpio in your chart and you say, let your guard down here, like, it's a lot harder than it seems like it would be. And that's something that comes with this like Leo Scorpio, is that Leo will never, ever, ever be able to understand like why Scorpio is the way it is. And Leo just wants so badly to like bring Scorpio like into the light with it. Like, come on, like come shine with me. But then like can end up evaporating Scorpio's pond in the meantime, this is a very, very fickle relationship where it's like you too hot, too cold, very Goldilocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like Leo season's hot, it's dry, it's humid, and then we have this very wet, cold, very.
And something super interesting about this anticial relationship, what is happening during Scorpio season? All of the leaves are orange. Leo, sun, red, warm colors, like all of a sudden we have this like warm radiance and it's like beautiful, but it's coming from the trees, like all of the leaves are dying.
Right. For green, Taurus, to fall, Scorpio.
Right.
Like literally it has to go from green to yellow, the sun. to red to brown, right? To like the Aquarius.
Like there's no leaves on the trees even
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Aquarius is just like the bare branches.
Right. Bare bones. Totally.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ready to talk about Virgo Libra?
Leaves. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
leaves.
Yeah.
You want to
And this
open
is a
this one
cool
up?
pair because we're branching back. Sorry, what did you say?
I was just saying, do you want to open this one up? And then I was
Oh.
like, oh, go ahead. You already,
Oh.
that's already open.
Okay, sorry. Well,
Apologize.
Virgo Libra is a really interesting combo because I love this pair for a ton of reasons. One, because we're playing back into the Aries Pisces, which we haven't talked about in forever, but we're playing with all these relationships again. There's a lot of really rich ones in these pairs because we have 4 planets exalted, right? So we have all these falls and all these doms. So there's a lot of interesting things happening here. First of all, Virgo's commanding Libra, right? So we have the earthy Mercury commanding the airy Venus. And that's interesting in one point because it means that Venus is getting directed by the practical, organized Mercury.
Well, and so like I think that this also ties into part of what we were saying earlier when we were talking about how much effort goes into true beauty. And
Mm,
like I imagine this as like the realism painter,
yeah.
like who spends a very, very long time sitting at the park painting every single detail of what they can see. And
Mhm.
there is commitment to it to complete something. With Virgo being an earth sign, it is much more able to follow through than, say, Sagittarius. And that going into Libra is like already Virgo likes things to be both accurate and precise. They are striving for perfection.
Mhm.
Libra additionally likes to strive for perfection. If not perfection, then beauty, like more than good enough. And so this combination together can, I feel like, really shows like how much labor goes into refinement.
Mhm. Yeah, like so first of all, like Mercury Venus, that will give you a lot of art in your chart. That's really interesting. I call this one the sculptor because I feel like it naturally is this, detailed detail, oriented nature in combination with that Venusian principle and mindset because like Virgo and Pisces like are both like idealists, right? And Virgo wants it done in an ideal way, super practically, and Pisces wants it done in like a super, abstract way, just want everybody to be happy. But then with Virgo Libra, it's cool because what we're seeing is the fall of Venus and the fall of the sun. But with Virgo and Libra, we're looking at the exaltation of Mercury and Saturn. So that whole Gemini Capricorn principle that we were talking about, Virgo and Libra's already got that going on like to a T. And then they have this extra Venusian principle, which is like making it gorgeous.
Right. But there's something so much more patient about Virgo Libra than there is with Gemini
Right.
Cap,
There's that
because
March
Gemini
energy.
is right. Like, and not only that, but Gemini is the diurnal sign commanding the nocturnal sign.
Right.
Whereas in this case, it's the nocturnal sign commanding the diurnal sign.
Totally.
So Virgo is capable of saying, like, we're going to pump the brakes. We're going to do this right the first time all the way through. And
Mhm.
like I really like sculptor like more than the realism painter, because sculpting is so like you don't have the time or the room for a mistake. Like a painter can paint over an error, but if you're chiseling at a marble sculpture, that you can't mess up. And that takes like there I don't think that anybody was truly born with that innate skill. Like they might say that about, huh?
Maybe some. Michelangelo, Pieta.
Okay, well, I was gonna say, like,
He
they
was
might
born
say
for it.
that about Michelangelo, but like, was it like nobody is just born a marble sculptor. Like, that's nonsensical. That is the hero's story. Like, the winners of history write the books, you know? Like, he definitely had to have some kind of practice. I'm sure he was naturally apt at it. I'm sure that it came so easily to him, but you still have to figure it out. And like, this is a very quick learner. Like, this combination, very quick learner. Same thing with Gemini Cap. I think that those are both quick learners because there's the grounded energy.
Commanding both of them. So the principle that's driving it is learn.
Right. And whereas like Virgo Libra, I feel like is also very much like learn through experience.
Right.
Whereas like Gemini Cap is like learn through observance.
Right. Like, let me just read a book so I can read, right? Air Mercury. But like Virgo Mercury is like, well, no, I need to read this handbook so I can build the computer. Right. It's like it has a very specific goal and like task it wants to have.
Like, if Virgo is practicing writing something and they're reading something about how to, they're going to be practicing in the meantime. Whereas like the Gemini energy is like, let me just absorb this all right now, forget what I forget, and then try it, and I'll figure it out in the meantime. But this is so much more patient and so much more articulate. And it's just very elegant. And I don't know if I would go as far as to say eloquent, where it's like peaceful, but I don't know, because like I always think about like Virgo is still the sign of service, and like Libra can be very servicing, like very people pleasing, and like there is effort that goes into like coordinating that kind of stuff. So it might not be as eloquent as it's experienced when you get that Pisces Libra like apex where you're like, okay, I get to relish in this. Like Virgo Libra is doing a lot to piece that together. Aries too, which is why we're gonna do the episode on quadrupotents.
Yeah, well, I think we nailed that archetype pretty well. There's more we can say, but we'll have lots of time in the next episode to elaborate more. So I think I'm comfortable capping it there.
Yeah, I think so too. We started this episode thinking we would be able to talk about Antiscia, Contra-Antiscia, all 12 different sign pairs, and then all the 3 pairs of 4. I don't know why we thought that we could do that, voracious as we may be. I know, but
Gemini Cap, Mars Rahu.
I know.
Things like that though, like what language are these people speaking?
Yeah, we're gonna have to make like Mercury do a little retrogradation. Next episode, we're gonna have to continue this because we thought that we would be able to do this all today. We lied.
So the minor dignities will be coming next episode after this one. Next. Yeah, double next.
Yeah. So this next episode,
we're going to talk about the quads. We're going to talk about the relationship of Antiscia to the domicile scheme, which is this whole fascinating complex of the quadrupotents that is mirroring the archetypal relationships between the domicile schemes and the Antiscia pairs, and not in a way that we talked about today. There's another connection that mirrors the whole thing that we didn't even talk about. So we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about the quads, the group of 4s. And it might even bring us into, well, no, that will probably be a hefty episode.
Yeah, we've got some heftier episodes coming up. So to anybody who stuck it through, you're a real one. You deserve a kiss on the forehead. Thank you very much. Mwah. But yeah, if you end up starting to feel lost. I feel like this will be a good preface for the next episode. If you start getting lost, we have plenty of episodes that are like laying foundations for what is coming up. So if at any point during this episode you were like, whoa, wait, what was that? Except for the bounds and the deacons, we haven't quite talked about those. We will be, we promise.
Next.
Yeah, soon.
Mm-hmm.
Happy stargazing, y'all. This has been a wonderful episode, though laborious.
Mm-hmm. Very Aqua Taurus of us.
Extremely.
Come with hard work.
I
hard work of delineating the archetypes. I mean, I know.
I feel like this has been very much Aries, Pisces, Virgo, Libra.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we had to start and end and start and end, like we did that more than once.
Yeah.
And then there were interruptions for both of us.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I meant to say about Cancer Sag. It's cats and dogs.
Oh!
It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, to anybody who's still listening at this point, you get that little Easter egg.
Yeah. All right. Happy stargazing. I'm exhausted.
Happy stargazing.
We've been talking for almost 4 hours.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we have almost been talking.
The longest one yet.
Yeah, let's end this right now. All right, we love you guys. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Happy stargazing.
Mercuranians out.